Hey, welcome to the pursuit of being a stand-up leader. I'm Jared Whitman. I'm here with John Russell of the
Good day.
Business Source, and we are breaking down John's book, Be a Stand-Up Leader, the ABCs of Getting the Job Done Right, chapter by chapter. This episode is about failure, and then we were just talking off camera about incorporating fear as well. And John,
Right.
John, you want to start off?
Yeah, I wrote a chapter on fear and I wrote a chapter on failure. And as Jared and I are sitting here talking, they're really related in some respects. And Jared was smart to point out that in addition to employee failure, there's entrepreneurial failure.
Two different things.
And my perspective is I think about only 25% of entrepreneurial businesses make it.
Yeah.
More than 5 years.
Right. Yeah.
And there's a reason why people work so hard and are so committed when you start your own business.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to fail.
Yeah.
So that fear of failure is a little person on your shoulder saying, keep working.
Yeah.
Keep working.
Yeah.
Come up with a new idea, make more calls, get more clients, right?
Talk more out there. I would even say, like, I just wrote this down. Fear kills more dreams than failure ever will. I think sometimes people are afraid to step forward outside of their comfort zone. And that's like the fear zone almost.
Yeah, fear can be a gridlock. I've had different experiences in my life where I was afraid that I was going to get fired.
Yeah,
even though I was a top producer.
Yeah.
Because people next to me were getting axed for not a lot.
Right.
And, when you're an entrepreneur, you're not afraid that somebody's going to fire you, but what are you afraid of?
I think there's a lot to be afraid of. Like right now, I work with subcontractors and I have people on my team that depend on me to keep the business going.
Right.
So, but I don't have a family or anything like you did.
Right.
Well, like you were telling me off camera.
Right.
But I think there's a lot of fear of, the people that are on your team, whether something's going to work or not.
Right.
If you're able to keep your business afloat, if you're able to
keep enough new business coming in to keep everybody busy.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
There's so much that goes into this sphere of fear.
Taxes can be fearful.
Oh my gosh. Like it went from all you have to, if you were an employee at a company like I was, to now you have to take care of every health insurance,
right,
business insurance, all of this stuff. You have to be robustly knowledgeable on all of these different things, and there's a lot to be afraid of.
Yeah, as when I was an account executive, I lost a huge account. It was $40,000 cancellation, which should today be about $80,000. This is back in the 80s. The cancellation was no fault of my own. Mm-hmm. It was a decision that Walgreens made to, instead of advertise, they're going to put a Walgreens on every corner. Walgreens is a pharmacy. Right. And every corner. So it wasn't my fault, but my boss, he wanted to fire me. Yeah. He's such a asshole. I'm just going to say it. So I immediately was struck with, am I going to have a job at the end of the day?
Right.
I didn't do anything wrong. Yeah. But yet he made me so afraid. Yeah. Of that failure that I didn't have anything to do with it. I'll never forget it. It left a pit in my stomach for the rest of my life.
Yeah. I think that's an unfortunate fear to have. If a business owner is making their employees fearful,
what kind of a toxic environment is that?
It's incredibly toxic. One of the companies that I worked at, they would fire people when it was convenient for them, even though they knew that person was in the wrong seat for months. Right. And they wouldn't do anything to build a map like, hey, here's a progress, here's the things you can do to get better. They would fire them when it got so difficult and they got so frustrated with that person, or when it was convenient for them. And I knew that because I was on the leadership team until I wasn't. And then it was this vortex of, okay, when's my time coming? Because I am no longer on the team. They won't give me the map back to the team. They won't give me any feedback
You're
on how I can
isolated.
improve. I was in the clique, and then I was not in the clique.
Oh my God.
And once I was out of the clique, then I was just so stressed out because I didn't know when my time was coming.
You almost can't continue.
It's difficult to.
So while the fear of failure is a constant reminder to do your best, I learned to accept that failure was just part of business, because
It is.
it had nothing to do with me, but man, they're throwing curveballs and fastballs.
Yeah.
And sometimes you hit them, sometimes you don't. What I wrote in my book was, no one likes to fail. Failure uncovers your faults and brings your weaknesses right to the surface.
Yeah.
So it's a perfect time to analyze your work process and sharpen your skills.
I think if you can take a look at the failure and ask yourself, where's my opportunity to learn? That makes
what are you learning from it?
That makes you a lot stronger as a leader or an employee.
Right.
I love failure to an extent.
It can be an asset if it's used correctly.
One of the things that I do I work with subcontractors that have just recently graduated or are in school,
Right.
and I look for them to fail so that they can learn.
Right.
But I take the responsibility for that failure. It's a failure on my watch.
So I wrote, don't be afraid to fail. If you're fearful, step back, realize this isn't the end of the world.
Oh yeah.
And don't be afraid to try again.
Yes.
Learn from your mistakes. If you're not, we always used to say this, if you're not pushing the envelope right to the edge, we were talking today about how fast you're running and about how fast people have to run to stay ahead of the wolves. If you're not failing occasionally, you're really not testing the edge. You're in the comfort zone, man. Everything's safe back here. Why would I want to push out? So in a culture with a stand-up leader, failure's part of the business.
Part of the growth.
It's part of the growth and experience that the owner doesn't always hit home runs. Management team and the stand-up leaders don't always hit home runs.
Right.
And the employees occasionally strike out. So how do you treat failure, and how do you minimize fear? I'm asking a question.
Yeah, no, I think if you can build failure into your business, it's I think as like an entrepreneur, I just look for the opportunity to learn and recognize that failure is a good thing.
So it goes on to say that failure is the best and hardest teacher.
Yeah.
And the lessons learned will probably stay with you forever. You never forget hitting rock bottom.
And if you do, then you're kind of practicing insanity.
So if you're not failing occasionally, you're not trying hard enough. I mean, you may make 10 proposals and only 3 of them close. Does that mean the other 7 are a failure? No. Unless your boss looks at it like that is. Like, how come you didn't close all 10? What about these other ones? So much for the 3. I'm going to beat you up for the 7 you didn't get.
Right. Which
and
is
that
unfortunate.
Sucks. That's terrible leadership. So stand-up leaders recognize failure as part of business, and failure creates coaching opportunities and innovation for improvement.
I agree with that.
So don't be afraid to fail.
Yeah. And going back to your comments on being inside your comfort zone, being an entrepreneur has really, I live in a state of fear almost, because I am continuing to do things that are outside of my comfort zone, almost feeling like an imposter sometimes. But I've
more than you actually are.
Right. But I'm becoming more aware of the opportunity to grow because of these experiences. And that almost gets me excited. So it's this weird checks and balances of fear and excitement, the nervous free fall of entrepreneurship.
I could see how you would feel like an imposter. They say you fake it till you make it. Yeah. That's bullshit.
Right.
I hate to tell you that.
I also think that like if you're not getting outside your comfort zone, and you're not going to know everything right away for that growth
Right.
opportunity.
No question.
If you want to level up, you have to take a bigger bite out of what you
So
can do.
continuous learning
Yeah.
and innovation and being willing to take on new equipment and new projects and things that we've talked about, where maybe you've got a situation that I've had experience with where it's like, okay, where can you tap to get more information to push out to minimize the chance for failure?
Right. So like masterminds or mentorship,
Yeah.
stuff like a coach.
Absolutely. Coaching is huge for getting people past that.
Exactly.
There's so much of a connection between fear and failure, but I think fear can be channeled. And I didn't write a huge chapter on fear because there are giant books written by psychologists
Right.
who know 100,000 times more about fear than I do. My experience comes from the street.
Yeah.
What scares the shit out of me?
And I would say, like, if you met one person that's afraid of fear, you've met one person that's afraid of fear, because we're all somewhat different.
Absolutely.
We're all uniquely ourselves. But the cool
Fear
thing
never
about
really goes away.
oh no, no, it doesn't. But the cool thing about what you did with your book and what we're doing here now is we're taking experiences of our own and we're sharing it. And we don't know what gold nuggets are in that
Right.
might connect with other people. So
It's an ongoing unfolding of perspectives.
yeah.
One thing that I have learned about fear after having lived in fear in business for most of my life, I don't live in as much fear now, probably because I'm 10, 20, 30 years into my career.
Yeah.
And I've been scared so much, so many times, it doesn't faze me anymore.
Yeah.
Because I've seen that, generally speaking, fear gets created by yourself.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's unwarranted.
The stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah. And one time a boss that I was working with came up to me. I was bitching to him about not making enough money. He's like, "What are you worried about?" Wife, 2 kids, a dog, a ton of expenses around that. I'm like, I'm worried about paying the bills next month. And you guys aren't showing that you're really competent in order to help make sure that I have some degree of stability here.
Right.
And they're like, "Oh, you're going to have to just let that go." I'm like, "Serious?" He goes, "Yeah, I don't worry about that." I'm like, "Well, okay." Well, it wasn't about 5 or 10 years later where I started to maybe understand a little bit that you can let fear go.
Yeah.
And not have it become a demon.
Right.
That haunts your mind and your psyche and affects your attitude, affects your emotions, it affects your relationships. It can be damaging.
Oh yeah. I think I've recently started listening to a book, and they're talking about the mindset of abundance, which has been beneficial. And I've done a lot of self work over the last 3-5 years.
Yeah.
For personal growth
Sure.
purposes.
Yeah.
And being less stressed out about fear or failure, and more, again, looking at the opportunity. And then also recognizing, one of the biggest things that I learned is that there are no really bad days. There's just bad moments. And then making sure that
let it pass.
A bad moment doesn't turn into a bad day or a bad life. I mean, we've survived 100% of the failures that we ever came up against,
Right.
and we'll continue to survive 100% of the failures that we
Yeah, I noted in the book, fear of loss, fear of not being able to pay your bills. A lot of people are struggling. Fear of losing your job, fear of losing a loved one, fear of losing a relationship, fear of losing a client, fear of the equipment not working. I mean, it's actually kind of always there.
Yep.
I wrote, it's a constant inside our subconscious. In many cases, it's fear that keeps us doing the right things and staying away from threats.
Yeah.
So stand-up leaders accept that fear can be a positive motivating factor. And my advice to all of you out there is to make friends with fear.
Yeah.
And then when bad things happen to good people, understand it's not going to last.
Right.
It's the moment, right?
And I think like you should only focus on what you can control. There's a lot of things that you can control, but there's also a lot of things that you can't control. And if you can't control something, and it's not your fault, then you shouldn't be fearful of that. Don't let the stories in your head take you down a vortex or a rabbit hole.
It's in your head.
Right.
You just said it.
Yeah.
We conjure up the fear, and sometimes it's legitimate.
Yeah.
And most of the time it's not.
Most of the time it's not.
So is fear your friend or your foe?
Friend.
It should be your friend.
Yep.
Make friends with it. I think your life is going to go a lot better if you understand that fear is just a good motivating factor, and it's a guide rail so that you don't do something that would actually cause failure.
Yeah.
So how can we use fear to achieve greater levels of success?
I think that by doing the thing you're afraid to do is the first step.
Having courage.
Having courage. It's very. You have to be very courageous to be an entrepreneur because you're putting a lot on the line.
Or to carry a lot of responsibility.
Well, yes, as a business owner as well. Yeah.
Or as a person that is just trying to get through life.
I agree. Life is a scary place, but I think going after it and not being afraid to ask a question or ask for the order, ask for what you want, that pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, that allows for greater growth. And if you're not growing, you're dying. You're kind of you're being stagnated.
It does keep you on your toes, doesn't it?
It's
kind of forces you forward a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think fear can be a motivator.
I agree.
And I think that fear can be controlled with the right thought process.
Yep.
I'm not saying it's easy because I've experienced deep fear in my lifetime.
Yeah.
But I've grown out of it to the point where I've learned to understand that tomorrow is a new day.
Sure is. It's a blank canvas.
And what happened to you today? One door closes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Another door opens.
Yep.
And you'd be surprised at how often the next door that opens, a lot better than the one I just got closed.
Right.
So I think fear can be a good thing.
I agree.
And I think it's one thing that can keep you from failing.
I agree with that, yeah.
So that's why we combine fear and failure today. They're similar but different. What do you have to add, Jared?
I think we covered that pretty well. I mean, it's a vastly large couple of topics.
Huge topic.
I think I've picked up some gold nuggets from that conversation from you. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I think I'm going to be friends with fear.
I agree.
And not fail.
Well, look for the learning opportunity.
Or try not to fail. Or minimize the risk of failure.
Yeah.
By using fear as a motivator.
Yeah.
How's that?
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks for being with us.